You're listening to Sports Radio Detroit.
All right, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Final Track Review. Here, as always, I'm your host, Chris Platte. Once again, this is on Sports Radio Detroit. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Got a very special episode, an episode that's actually been weeks in the making as far as the brainstorming process goes. I'm excited to get to that. But first, I want to shout out something going on Sports Radio Detroit. If you are not already aware, it is the annual 2019 Detroit Female Personality Contest. The first round goes from March 19th to March 23rd. The second round from March 24th to March 28th. The Elite 8 will be March 29th through April 3rd. The Final Four, April 4th through 7th. The title game, April 8th through April 12th. So as these weeks come and the rounds approach, be sure to participate. The links will be on the site. We currently have the SRD Prep archives. It will be there, so be ready and make sure to consume that, follow that, support that, all of the good stuff, as always. Now let's get to today's show. So I'm very excited for today's show for several reasons. One reason in particular is that we're talking about one of my favorite artists. Another reason is that this is going to be outside of the box, outside of the realm that this podcast has come accustomed to. And so, last time when I did the 2 Chainz, I stepped out of the box a little bit. I had somebody on, and that was great. Shout out Eric once again for coming on the podcast. That was a great episode. So check that out if you missed it. We reviewed 2 Chainz album. But now I've been talking with Roger and I've been talking with Sports Radio Detroit, and I really wanted to kind of explore other avenues of hip-hop because I myself have my own hip-hop podcast, and that's just how I'm wired. I like reviewing albums. It's a part of hip-hop. It's a big part of hip-hop. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy keeping everyone up to date rather on all of the new content that is dropping, because there's always a lot of content. There's been good albums that have dropped since the last review, and I'd love to talk about them. But I'm really interested in doing and providing a larger scope of hip hop, because hip hop as a whole is massive. You have not only what's going on now with the music, but also the past, which has affected now, which has affected culture. And so March is the perfect month for this, because March is what I like to call Biggie month. Now, Notorious B.I.G., if you know rap, you know him. There's no doubt about it. There's no need to kind of give too much backstory on him personally. But March is the important month for Biggie, because on March 25th, 1997, Biggie released his last studio album, Life After Death, which became certified diamond, the first solo hip-hop artist to ever do so. Also, March is the month he tragically passed away. He passed away on March 9th, 1997, 3 weeks prior at the age of 24. So this month, I've been wanting to figure out how to celebrate Biggie, how to celebrate his legacy, because he is, to me, not only one of my favorite artists ever, not only one of the greatest artists ever, but also just someone who has a tremendous impact on hip-hop and its history, and is one of the most awesome stories. So I want to talk about his legacy. I want to get into some of my favorite records, and I even got something that you guys can check out after the show when you're done listening to the podcast. But Biggie is very, very important to me. He's one of the first hip hop artists that I grew up listening to. He's someone that I was immediately drawn to with his words. I mean, to me, he's just a wordsmith, and in my opinion, he has the best flow in hip-hop history. I mean, he could bend any word to his will, make any verse, any line, any bar sound entirely smooth and flawless, and there is no stutters, no cuts, no nothing. You can't even you can't even tell that this guy, you would never thought this guy punched in lines. And for those of you that don't know what punching in a line is, it's when you record a whole verse, but let's say you messed up, you stumbled on one of the parts of the verse, but you caught yourself back. So then what they'll do is they'll keep the part that works, the part of the verse where you were in the pocket of the instrumental and everything was cool, but then they'll go and punch in the line. And actually, there's a funny story, and you can see it actually in the Straight Outta Compton biopic where Eazy-E is recording Express Yourself, and he didn't write it, of course. Cube wrote it, and it was supposed to be recorded by another member, but they gave it to Eazy because they thought, this is Eazy, this is his story, this is Eazy could kill this. And so Eazy, this is like one of his first times getting into rap, and so he doesn't have much experience. He's very raw, unpolished, and he's struggling to hit each bar of the verse. It's one of the funniest moments of that entire movie, and I really, really enjoy that record. Well, too, yeah, I enjoy the record, but also that scene. And so Eazy-E has to punch in bar by bar that entire verse, and 16 bars is a traditional verse. I believe that verse was actually 16 as well. So imagine just doing 16 takes of getting it right, by the way. That's not counting the other times where you misdeliver, mess up, and all that. So it can add up. But the point is, sometimes when you're listening to music, you can hear lines punched in if the engineer and all of those people that are involved in the behind the scenes stuff, if they're not really good at it, you can kind of tell when lines are punched in or they're off key just a little bit. And Biggie, I mean, you listen to his catalog, and that is just never a case. He always sounds smooth. He always sounds in the flow of the pocket. I mean, everything he does sounds like a freestyle in its truest form, which is something that is just incredible when it comes to an artist. And that's I'll always remember as one of the biggest things when it comes to remembering Notorious's legacy and just his craft. It always stands out to me. And another thing is his charisma, man. Like, Biggie was able to say the goofiest things. He was able to make fun of himself. He was able to make fun of you. He was very much a comedian on the mic, and he had a lot of moments that you just when you hear them, you laugh, and it was really just, he had a personality that shined through on the mic. And that's, to me, one of the hardest things to do as an artist, is to sound not only flawless but also to sound authentic. It's something that it really takes a special talent, a special understanding, a special connection to the content that he's making, the craft that he's working on. But to this day, Big's legacy lives on through some of the greatest rappers of all time, from Jay-Z. Jay-Z was an artist that took under Big's wing very early, very, very early in Jay's career, as Jay is starting to come up. And Big actually was forming a group called The Commission, in which he wanted to just kind of put on young artists, and Jay-Z was one of the central figures in that group. So Jay-Z actually got to really kind of work under Big and work with him. He also had a verse on the Dough, Love the Dough, on Life After Death, Biggie's last album before his passing. And even though he passed before his album was submitted weeks before that point and everything. So that release date was final. It was been promoted. Everybody was waiting for it. And then he had his tragic passing. So yeah, it's not like today's music where it's just been always kind of submitted. I mean, you hear stories about J. Cole or Drake putting in a verse the day before the album's released now, and that's because of the way technology has advanced. But that's besides the point. Yeah, so Jay-Z had a verse on Life After Death, which was a really dope verse, by the way. He sounds totally young, and it's awesome to listen to, so I highly recommend that record. And Eminem always credits the greatest artist of all time, and he always mentions Biggie in that list. He has the song Until I Collapse. It goes, I got a list. Here's the order of my list that's in. It goes Reggie, Jay-Z, Tupac, and Biggie. So he names Biggie as the fourth greatest artist of all time, and then and it goes on to say Andre, Corrupt Nas, and then me, and so he names himself ninth Until I Collapse, and that's peak prime Eminem right there. And he said that Biggie was the fourth greatest artist in his opinion of all time, and there are many people that would even put him higher, that would put him number one. But even beyond just the Jay-Z's and the Eminems, Jay-Z, you can see his style through Biggie. Eminem, you can see kind of the wordsmith, the flow, all of that. Not that it sounds Biggie-esque, but you could tell that Biggie's influence on Eminem when it comes to rhyming. And a lot of his lyrics have been sampled in countless records from artists like Alicia Keys, 50 Cent, Lil Wayne, The Game. I mean, there's tons of artists that have sampled him. I mean, Mo Money, Mo Problems. How many times have we heard that? That's a classic line that just comes through to this day. The 10 Crack Commandments. I mean, how many times is that referenced? I bet you a lot of people don't know this, but the six whenever Drake comes on, where it goes six. That's actually comes from Biggie's 10 Crack Commandments when he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's like six, and he's naming off the commandments of drug dealing, if you will, and yeah, when it gets to six, that's actually where the six Drake comes from the sixth God. So that's a little fun fact there. And in addition to his influence, Big leaves behind two of the greatest albums, and these are widely considered the greatest albums of all time when it comes to hip-hop. Ready to Die, his debut in 1994, the same year as Illmatic, and also, of course, the last album, Life After Death, which was released in 1997. Now, Biggie, Ready to Die, and Life After Death. Ready to Die was a single album. Life After Death was a double album. So personally, if you're asking me to choose between the two, I would say that Ready to Die I would choose, just because of the fact that Ready to Die had, how do I say this? Ready to Die had a better batting average, so to speak, and that's very natural when it comes to double disc. But I will say, of almost all the double discs in the history of hip hop, there is arguably none better than Life After Death, for the simple fact that the hit ratio is just, there's very few tracks on that album that I would skip through. But that being said, it's a double album versus Ready to Die, a single album. Ready to Die, the quality is there, the substance is there, just like it is in Life After Death. But Ready to Die is shorter, so therefore the replay value is a little bit higher in my opinion. So I would go with Ready to Die, even though I like a lot of the polished sounds of Life After Death. Life After Death features a lot of, grimy East Coast beats, boom bap centric, like Kick in the Door, and then it's got the club records like Hypnotize and the R. Kelly song, and what's the one with Lil' Kim? I'm blanking on it right now, but the song with Lil' Kim. And so he's got the big records, the big commercial records, but he's also got the Going Back to Cali, which sounds very West Coast vibe, bouncy, very synth heavy. So Big has, on Life After Death, he has all these sounds kind of culminating together, and then he, is able to, of course, showcase his storytelling on tracks like I Got a Story to Tell that are classic. People are still trying to figure out who that Knicks player is to this day, because in that song, Biggie talks about sleeping with a Knicks player's girlfriend, and so to this day he doesn't mention him in the song. So to this day, people are still trying to figure out who that Knicks player is. And I think that's one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in hip hop. So, Big's Life After Death was very polished, but the rawness of Ready to Die, plus just the fact that we got records like Juicy. How many people know that song? And that's going to transition into my favorite records, because Juicy will kick it off there. How many people know the opening bars to Juicy? It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper, and Heavy D up in the limousine, hanging pictures on the wall. Like, I guarantee you, there's a ton of hip hop fans. There's millions of hip hop fans from my generation, from previous generations, and from the current generation, the younger generation, that know those, at least those opening bars, if not that entire verse to Juicy. That is one of the most all-time iconic songs. And not only that, it has one of the most iconic videos. Big Sean actually shouted it out, and I believe the song's My Last, where he's talking about, oh man, I want to have a crib like Big had and Juice in that Juicy music video. So that is a iconic staple song. Another one is Everyday Struggle. That to me is one of the best songs of Big. Big opens up often, maybe not as often as some of the other rappers, like some of his other contemporaries like Tupac, but but on records when Big opens up, he opens up in a great way. And Everyday Struggle is a classic example of that. It is a all time great record, and I heavily encourage everyone to listen to it. It talks about him just really going through the everyday struggle, trying to figure out how to maneuver not only his fame and success, but also how he maneuvered in his past to get to where he was. And so it's a very ambitious story where he gets very introspective and personal on that record. And if you like it, I do highly encourage. Not that this is a big record, but it's a remix of this record, Everyday Struggle. John Connor remixes this song, and he absolutely kills it. And he goes through his struggle, and I'm a big Sean Connor fan, and that record is highly dope. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. Another record I would suggest for you to check out if you're just trying to get into Biggie or want to know more records from him, Party and Bullshit. This is a song that not a lot of people know. To be honest with you, this was a record that I kind of discovered a little bit later than I'd like to admit. When I did the deep dive on Notorious, I just thought I listened to Ready to Die and Life After Death, and then I kind of skimmed through those other two albums because they were what they were. They were posthumous. They weren't in Big's vision. So I kind of just, I have a weird thing when it comes to posthumous albums. It's hard for me to really take them in entirely because I don't know if that's what the artist wanted. I don't know if the artist wanted those records out or not. So it's kind of a gray area for me. So, but Party and Bullshit is just a single that he had, and I believe it was 90. I believe it was 95. That record came out, if I'm not mistaken, and that record is absolutely fun. It is super bouncy. Big is talking his shit, and it's got a super catchy hook, just party and bullshit. It's a very good record. I highly recommend it. Still bangs to this day. Definitely check that one out. Another one you guys all know if you know Biggie, and that is Hypnotize. Not only do I love this record for shouting out Detroit, but it is just the ultimate bounce banging club record to this day. I absolutely love this record, whether I hear it on the radio, whether I hear it at a party, at a club. I mean, this record to this day still goes anywhere, and not only are there incredible female vocals on the hooks, but Biggie just absolutely shreds that beat. And not only does he spit some dope bars, but he also stays within the commercial pocket, and he walks that fine line very well. And that's another great skill of Biggs, was his ability to be commercially successful with substance, something that not a lot of artists have been able to successfully do. And the last record I want to highlight is Kick in the Door. Now, Kick in the Door is a record that starts off with a very, very entertaining skit from somebody who is clearly hating on Biggie, talking about, Ready to Die was cool. It was all right. It was cool. But I got better music than that. I'm dope. Check me out. And then Big just comes in snapping off Kick in the Door, which has like the meanest bass. It's just absolutely knocking. It's one of the most aggressive Big tracks I can ever remember, and so it's to this day it's a record that absolutely bounces in the whip. I play it all the time. I thoroughly enjoy that record, so check that one out. But that's going to do it for my favorite records on Big. Now, if you actually want to check out more records from Big, I do have a shameless plug. You could check out a playlist that I have. I have Apple Music, I have Spotify, I have Tidal, so whatever streaming service you have, You could check this out just by searching my name, Chris Platte. That's ChrisPlatte. On there, you can find a list of all my public playlists. I do playlists for all my favorite artists. I'll do my favorite records from Snoop Dogg, my favorite records from T.I., Eminem, Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, so on and so forth. And my Notorious BIG is one of my most downloaded favorite playlists of the artists. And I got on their records like Who Shot Ya, Living in Pain, which was actually a dope collab. I know it was on his posthumous album, but it was Tupac, Mary J. Blige, Nas, and Biggie. And this was actually a real song. I believe it was just Pac and Biggie and Mary J. Blige at the time. I don't even know if Mary J. Blige was the one on the hook, if I'm not mistaken. But this was an actual record that wasn't just a verse from Biggie and a verse from Tupac that were meshed together after their deaths. This was actually, you could tell by the way they both reference the line "Living in Pain," which is what the song is built around. So this was a real record. I don't know the actual time this was recorded. I know it was before their beef, but obviously. But for that being said, it's still a very dope record that I encourage everyone to check out. Other records like What's Beef, again, Notorious Thugs, going back to Cali, which I mentioned, Sky's the Limit's one of my favorite instrumentals of all time. Give Me the Loot, one of the greatest early album hits you can ever have, right up there with Ambition as a Rider to me. Big Papa, of course, Suicidal Thoughts. I got tons of records on here, so if you're a big fan, absolutely check them out. And another playlist I have, actually, for those that are interested, is I have a Tupac vs. Biggie playlist, where in this playlist I essentially pit a Biggie song and a Pac song that are in the same vein, that are similar in some absence, whether it be the content that they're talking about, whether it be sonically, like is it a commercial record? Is this a storytelling record? Is this just a braggadocious hip hop record? Like, so I try to match up similar records that between the two artists, and I go back and forth for about, I believe, 20 tracks each. So it's a 40-track playlist, I believe. Maybe I shortened it since, but it goes back and forth and alternates. So when you get to really compare these artists, that, okay, even though Tupac had a lot more catalog, just going toe to toe, okay, look at the story. Who's a better storyteller? You listen to a Tupac song, then you listen to a Biggie song. Okay, I think it's Biggie, or I think it's Tupac. And then, okay, who has the better like radio record? Is it Biggie or is it Pac? And you keep going through, and so in your head it's kind of almost this game you can play with yourself, where you can really kind of come to a conclusion, whatever that conclusion is. Our conclusions might be different when it comes to that, but that's what the playlist is for you to kind of be able to listen to those two artists in similar veins, with comparable songs, or what I believe are comparable songs, and then form your own conclusion off that. So that's one of the very many things that I do with my playlist that I would love if any of you checked that out and gave me some feedback on it. Again, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, it's on Tidal, whatever you have as a streaming service. Just be sure to search my name, Chris Platte, and you can check out all my Biggie playlists, among other things. Again, I got countless playlists on there, so check those out. Shameless plug. And once again, I want to be sure, if you didn't catch those dates earlier in the Sports Radio Detroit Female Personality Contest earlier in this podcast when I talked about it, again, the first round goes from the 19th to the 23rd of March, the second round from the 24th to the 28th, the Elite 8 from the 29th to April 3rd, the Final Four from the 4th to the 7th of April, and the title game the 8th through the 12th. So be sure to participate in that. And however, again, you can get all the information on the site. All the links will be there. Be sure to check those out and participate. Until then, I'll see you later this week with some more NBA content. Going to be looking at the NBA playoff picture, of course. Going to be talking about the Pistons. They've had an interesting week, among some other teams. And and maybe I'll finally do that Lakers deep dive that I've been teasing for a couple weeks. I want to make sure I get that right. I want to make sure I get the right intel, the right information, and I approach it the right way, in a fresh way. So it might get it this week, you might get it next week, but definitely going to get some playoff content. So be ready for that. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I am Chris Platte. This has been the Last Track Review. Not a review of an album, a review of an artist, or a conversation, I'd like to say, about an artist, the Notorious B.I.G. May you rest in peace. Thank you for all of the incredible art that you gave us, and I hope that my words were able to influence you to try and check out his music and see what you like, because I think he's a great artist, and I have the utmost respect for him. So thank you everyone for listening. Have a good week, and I will see you later.
This has been an SRD production.